And hello all, how is everybody? It looks like I am not talking. Let me fix that. Gee, this is what I get for trying to throw everything together. All right, much better. Now my mouth moves. So, how is everybody? I know it's been a while since I've done a live stream, and I know it's kind of been a little bit of a while since I've done a live show. So, ooh, yes, I am all in your heads now. All right, folks. So, here's a little update. I've been a little bit busy here and there, a little bit of coffee burnout. Took some time off from putting out content and kind of getting back in the groove. Been messing about with settings and trying to get things set up. It doesn't look like a flat earther. Yeah, pajama pants. It's not flat. Sorry. But yeah, I've been trying to get back in the groove, trying to get more content together and things like that. Been digging through some of my stuff from my previous channel and trying to throw that together. And that's kind of sort of what we have tonight. We have a couple of little experiments. This is back when I was doing full-on long experiments and releasing really, really long videos. I mean, like 2 hours long, and you're just sitting there watching a telescope mount move. Yeah, that kind of thing. All right. Well, like the title says, this is kind of about that cold moon, you know, that thing that a lot of people say is real. So let's go ahead and get started and take a look at it. All right, so we got a couple videos here. I'll be starting this here in a second, but we've all seen videos where people have taken thermometers and set them by the window and then inside the house, or black top or the hoods of a car or something like that. And they always show these massive differences in temperature. So let's start off and take a look at this experiment.
We have a standard folding table here with a cookie sheet on one side that will be exposed to the moonlight, and we have an identical cookie sheet here that we have created shade for. These are the exact same cookie sheet, so we know that the results will be true as far as that's concerned. They'll be equal distance from the ground, so we can't claim one was closer to the ground or another heat source. Okay, everybody, it's about 2 a.m. We got the moon right overhead, nice and bright here. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit here.
Yeah, that is a nice bright moon.
So we got about 93.7% according to Google. So let's take the temperature of the cookie sheet in the moonlight and see what we got. Let's see, we got about 46 now.
Now pay real close attention to the difference in temperature.
Right around 40, 45.9, 46. And right around 46 it's hovering. Okay, now let's go to the moon.
So we got 46.
Shade here. As you can see.
No, I can't really see it because you're shooting this in the dark.
On this side, let's see what we got here. .5, pointing directly at the center of this cookie sheet in the shade.
Now, so that's about a 4-degree difference, but let's take a look at a nice $200 handheld infrared laser thermometer. It says its margin of error is plus minus 1 degree Celsius. He was doing it in Fahrenheit, so the difference would be even greater. But in his video, he makes no notation as to the margin of error of the infrared thermometer that he uses. That's something that is very, very critical. And yes, PJCnet, the temp guns do have a fair amount of inaccuracy. That's why I find it kind of amusing that folks use it for these types of experiments, because direct sensor readings is a far more accurate setup. So let's move on.
I'm using a FLIR, forward-looking infrared device, and it is an extremely clear night with a extremely bright full moon, and we've got a shadow. So let's do, in the light of the full moon, 16 degrees Fahrenheit, 16 degrees Fahrenheit, 13, 12, yeah, okay. Here we are in the shadow. You can't see the shadow, but I am absolutely pointing it in the shadow. 22 degrees average, 22, 21, 22. Let's go outside. 18, 19. This is in the moonlight. 20, 19, 19. Also in the moonlight over here. 17, 15, 14. And this is in the shadow right here. Here's the base of the shadow. The base of the shadow, of course, since the moon's been rising, is the spot, yeah, right here, 24, 23 degrees. I'll make sure I'm in the shadow. Yeah, there we go. 19 degrees. 18, 17.
That would be in partial shade.
Also in the moonlight. So, there you go.
Now again, your consumer level FLIRs are great. They are pretty cool toys. They actually have a lot of practical uses. But as we can see here, this is the FLIR E4. This is $1,000. This is one of their more expensive compact handhelds. And the margin of error is plus minus 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit within the temperature range that he was using it. But there's also the general overall range in his video. So you're looking, let's see, he had about 13 to, 18 or so. So again, like 4 or 5 degrees. So both experiments compared, let's just say 4 degrees. Let's just make it simple, 4 degrees. And let's just ignore the margin of error for now. Now let's go on to my setup. This is how my setup was set up. As we know, wood is a very poor thermal conductor and is very good for isolating thermal sensors, short of very specific materials. Now, I have a metal disc in place. The metal disc blocks the moon and a small portion of the sky around the moon. The metal disc, and I used a ferrous metal, I used a low gauge steel. The disc is metal so that it can shield the sensor from EM emissions coming from the moon. So anything from RF all the way up to low energy gamma. If you ever remember those little radiation vapor experiments, alcohol vapor experiments, where you take a small piece of material. I mean, I've seen it done with bananas even. And you place it in an alcohol vapor chamber and you get those little streaks that come off. You have beta and alpha radiation coming off. This would definitely block that. This would also block low energy gamma radiation. Now, in my official setup, I have it painted white as well, and it is it's parabolic. I arced it so that it reflects all radiant energy coming from the moon as away from the sensor that's sitting behind it. Now, I box lot purchased these little digital thermometers and went through all of them. I take them and put them in a glass, a column of water next to each other. and watched the difference between each one, and got down to a set that was actually 1/10 of a degree Fahrenheit offset from each other. So they read like 1/10 of a degree difference between the two. But generally when I do my experiments, I double that margin of error. Just to be safe. Just to be safe. It's a reasonably safe margin, so if we're showing, a couple degrees difference in between the two sensors, the way they're set up, then yeah, cold moonlight's going to happen. Yeah, it's confirmed or verified. So let's keep going and show you the second part of the setup, and this is very critical. Here it is on an EQ mount. So I am literally tracking the moon while it's doing this. So it is always blocking just the moon in that small region of sky. Got the sensor on that end, got the sensor on this end that is blocked by the disk, by the white painted disk. And if you get right up behind it, you can see that it blocks the moon. Now, the thermal sensors are right there on the mount, and I had a camera watching it. Now, this is a time lapse of the process. I did this experiment for 2 hours straight. Now, in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see the temperature change between the two. You might see a couple small variances, and this is due to thermal eddies, and it generally still stabilizes. So we keep going and going and going and going and going and going. Yeah, this was a really long experiment. And when I originally uploaded this, I uploaded the whole 2 hours of data collection. Now, if you pay real close attention, the temperature is not that different between the two sensors. Let's
go take a look.
Yeah. All right, so here's the 1 hour check-in. There we go. That's sensor 1.
There's thermometer 2.
That's sensor 2. Confirm that it is still blocking the moon.
2, still blocked by the moon.
And there's the readout.
So far. Now, I'm not going to tell you which one's which, but yeah. So let's check back in another hour.
So here's the last hour of the experiment. Again, the variances are very, very small. And you'll notice when there's a thermal eddy, is one sensor will pick up, one sensor will jump in temperature, then kind of sort of drop off, and then pick up, the other one will pick up, and so on. Me personally, I'm just watching the stars move in the background. But as you can see, it's a fairly halfway decent, well thought out setup. I'm not blocking half the sky or 3/4 of the sky or anything like that. I'm blocking just a very small portion of the sky. Hey, Commander 401, how's it going?
Like 2 hours and a minute.
And here's the closing.
Sensor here, shade here. And the moon is still blocked. Now, I did not keep track of which one of these is which.
Which is honest. I'm being completely honest.
Let's wipe these off.
I wrote it down and then accidentally threw out the paper.
There, it's a little clearer. Now I'm going to grab this one. Hold it in my hand. While we're holding this in my hand, we're going to see which one warms up. There we go. So this one was
The one on the left here is the bottom one, is the bottom readout. So I'm going to call that a wrap. I think 2 hours is more than enough.
So the interesting part of this is I've seen a couple of experiments where they've done a bit of work, a little bit more work. Most of them are still using the laser infrared sensors. I've seen, like you guys here, we probably seen like plain Jane old school glass thermometers without ever any comparing them side by side to make sure that they're even close to reading the same in the same conditions. So yeah, that was literally that was a coffee draining experiment, because I sat there and I watched the monitor the entire time. But as we can see, the end result is only, a couple tenths of a degree here and there. Now, in scale, comparatively, that's orders of magnitude less than what the two proof videos showed. So, as far as I'm concerned, I would consider that valid evidence in a reasonably well-conducted experiment in order to make sure that, no, there is no cold moonlight. Now, I will end up redoing this experiment in the middle of summer, and just to see what happens. Because who knows? Maybe I missed something. Maybe it's because the ambient temperature was so cold. Maybe it was because there was a lot of humidity in the air, and so you had condensation. Granted, my argument with against condensation being a considerable factor is condensation would have increased the thermal dissipation rate on the sensor that was exposed to the moon, so it should have been cold. Now, let's move on to another bit of the moon. So, this gets into the whole flat Earth, the moon changes size, the sun changes size, so on and so forth. I mean, we're all pretty familiar with this. Let's take a look at the comments. Ooh, Commander, you got most of the render sequence done? Awesome. I can't wait to see it. Oh, and by the way, guys, I was actually really hoping for cold moonlight, because I would just put a big magnifying glass on the roof of my house and use the moon to chill my beer. I was kind of upset when it turns out that moonlight's not cold. That would have really sucked. Okay, so we've all heard about the sun and the moon changing size. So I conducted another experiment, and this is one where when I initially did it, I did it live. So the original live stream was about 4 hours of just staring at the moon. So here's the setup. The moon is at its highest point in the sky. It's at the meridian at 22:15 and 45 seconds UTC. As we can note here, as alt, it is 180, so it is directly south, and it is 31, almost 32 degrees above the horizon. The distance that Stellarium gives you is from your point of observation. So this is kind of critical. And it says that it is 383,000 kilometers away. And it, of course, gives you the diameter. Now, at the end, the moon was just about 6 degrees above the horizon. And as we can see, let's go back. That's 22 military time, 22:15. So 23:15, that's an hour. 0:15, that's another hour. 02:15. So we're looking at hours. Like I said, hours. So again, there's your distance. There's its elevation above the horizon. And of course, the size. So side by side, this is how it looks. So what did I do? Plugged in that distance, plugged in that size, and derived its angular size in arc minutes. I then converted arc minutes to arc seconds. I then took the camera's pixel size versus the focal length of the telescope and calculated the angular resolution per pixel, which is 1.95 arc seconds per pixel. So you can then take that angular size in arc seconds, divide that by the imaging scale or angular resolution per pixel, and you come out with, well, at the beginning, it should be 958.8 pixels in diameter. I then calculated for it when it was just about 6 degrees above the horizon. Same thing. Arc minutes to arc seconds, angular resolution per pixel, arc seconds divided by angular resolution per pixel gives you 949. Now, let's see what happens. And here's a very short clip of the video sequence itself. And I mean, I kind of enjoy looking at the moon, so I wasn't too particularly bothered by staring at the camera tracking the moon. By building an arc with those arc seconds, I don't know. I'll give that a shot. I wonder if you can build an arc out of numbers. I'll have to check with a couple people on that. So again, another long experiment. Now, the reason why the moon is drifting is not because my mount was out of alignment. It's because the moon was well below the celestial equator. That ends up being a different arc at that time of year, or at that time of orbit in the month, because it fluctuates from, plus minus 5 degrees. It's got a 5-degree variance, north and south. So as we can see, it's still a moon, and as it starts to get close to the horizon, you will start seeing the moon starting to pass through trees. So I tried to shoot this as long as I could. I ended up clipping like the last couple minutes because I was shooting pretty much over top my neighbor's roof through a bunch of bushes, which was, just pretty much useless. So here we are, we're getting towards the end of the second sequence. There's some trees, and boom. So I took still images. This is from the master moon footage from the start, measured the radius, and it comes out to 958. Well, that's a shock. No, not really. Because even if it was flat Earth, you still would have had the same result. Now here it is at set 942. Now I do have some focus drift towards the end. That's a thermal issue with telescopes. The focus will start to drift. But we're still within a couple pixels of what I projected. So we're talking a very, very small margin of error. If I reshot this again at the full 20 megapixel per frame and filled the frame, used a different focal length scope and filled the frame, I'd be able to get even greater accuracy. Now, let's compare this to flat Earth. Now, for flat Earth, well, the angle size is going to be the same, but there's our distance in kilometers. We're going to end up getting the same arc minutes. Now, how did I get that distance in kilometers? It's quite simple. I triangulated. 111 kilometers is 60 nautical miles, or 69.1 statute miles. So if you sight directly above and then sight from 1 degree off, that's the triangulated distance for side A. Side B is going to be the hypotenuse, so that's going to be a little longer. So I've established a distance using a triangulated baseline. Now, what about set at 5 degrees and 41 arc minutes above the horizon? It ends up triangulating out to, wow, that's pretty damn far away, 64,000 kilometers at set, using the same triangulated elevation of 6,366 kilometers. Now, I'm probably going to hear some crap about the 3s and the 6s, but who cares? So what should it be at set? What should its size be at set? Still using the same radius, or still using the same diameter of the moon. At that distance, it should be 185 seconds of arc. Well, let's go back to here. Oh, let's see, I get 1.95 arc seconds per pixel. So I can then take the masters that I shot, the still frames I pulled from the master footage, and then go into any photo editing software and reduce, make a copy, paste a layer, and reduce that down to 95 pixels. Think about this. The closing shot on my test was 940 something pixels. So that's a significant difference. So what would this look like? Well, I know that some flat earthers will give you an excuse. They'll come up with, well, lensing. Lensing, yeah, there's atmospheric lensing that makes it look bigger. Well, don't worry, I got that taken care of as well. So, observed. Now, according to perspective, the moon should be this tiny little thing, and there should be some light fall off due to the increased distance. But what about lensing? Well, if you use atmospheric lensing to make it the same size as it was in the footage, what you end up having is a double damming effect. The distance, you have inverse square loss, inverse square law, loss of light, fall off of light due to distance. Then that is compounded with lensing, because inverse square also works the same way with lensing. If you magnify an object, if you double its magnification, you have its light. So with this significant difference, you're looking at, for those of you in the photo world, you're looking at about a 10-stop difference in length from lensing alone. I actually made the lensing example a little bit brighter than normal, than what it actually would be, because if I dim it down to what it should actually be, I had to turn the brightness all the way up on my monitor and catch it at just the right angle just to see it. So, why am I showing pictures of green cheese? That's not green cheese, that's gray cheese. Ew, gray cheese. Ugh. Ugh. Now, if it was blue cheese, wait, now I get, damn. Now I gotta wait for a blue moon to see if it's blue and maybe get a big picture of blue cheese in space. God, hell with you. Chris, I actually think about these things. You post a comment like that in chat, I'm going to go to sleep tonight going, what if? What if? I hate puzzles. They drive me nuts. So, at the end of the day, the observed size and brightness compared to what perspective says contradicts Flat Earth's claim on perspective. If you toss in lensing, it blatantly contradicts. There's such a significant difference between what you would see with lensing and what you would see, what you actually observed. Now, I calculated this out for my sun example, and I will probably end up putting a link to that in the description here in the next day or two, as well as links to the original footage for, well, maybe not the original footage, and I'll get into that in a second. I'll end up posting links for the footage for the cold moonlight test, the video for the cold moonlight test, as well as the video for the moon time lapse, the angular size test. Now, the reason why I say I wasn't going to post original footage is because when I recorded this moonshot, I shot it in RAW. At like 4K. So the time lapse, which is 1 frame every second or so, is like 70 gigabytes. I don't think anybody's gonna download a 70 gigabyte video just to watch a time lapse of the moon. So that's pretty much where this is at. I just wanted to throw these together and get these out here. The way I initially released it, it was just the straight raw data and pretty much tortured everybody by sitting through hours and hours and hours of moon and me watching thermometers and such. So I don't think anybody really wants to sit through that again. So trimmed it down, made it pretty, and put it back out there again. Now, I did put a link in the chat for meets. I'll go ahead and put it in again. For those of you that want to come on an open panel and discuss any of this, I'm using my regular meets account, so get about an hour's worth. So there's probably about 30 minutes or so left on it. But the meets link is there if anybody wants to pop in. If not, let me know, and we can kind of sort of close this out here. This is a bit longer than, like a typical debunk video, stuff like that. No, Charlie, I didn't do it naked. No. Look, I have a loincloth, okay? A loincloth does not equal naked. Trust me. But lensing has been superseded by Einstein lensing. Oh, great. So now we have black holes in between us and the moon. That's freaking wonderful. Wait, if we have black holes between us and the moon. How the hell are we still here? Yes, I do have a necklace. But I generally don't count jewelry as clothing. An accessory maybe, but not clothing. Now the belt, on the other hand, is necessary. That's part of the clothing, because that keeps my loincloth up. It's not an attractive black hole. That's funny, Wunsen. That's funny. Yeah. I could probably make a couple nasty comments about not so pretty black holes and various conspiracy theorists, but I won't. I will be nice. It's more a meh, whatever black hole. That is funny. That is hilarious. Jen, we're not going to get into that. Not today. I'm going to try to keep this as a decent, civil live stream. The Naked Loki Fish is on OnlyFans. It's just there minding its own business, hanging with the teapot. Oh, you guys are so funny. You guys make me laugh. You guys make this worth it. I really do appreciate it. So again, the meets link is open. If anybody wants to hop in, just let me know. Charlie, the kitty's massive. The kitty's massive. He's only like, what, 6 months now? And he's like kind of like the largest cat in the house. And he's going to get bigger. I'm actually getting kind of scared. His paws, when he spreads out his paws, are the size of a Kennedy $50. No joke. And what's funny is he's going to get massive, and he has this cute little squeaky Mike Tyson voice. It's hilarious. No, Aaron, that's all good. Hey, you want to hop in, don't want to hop in? Yeah, either way. I mean, I'm kind of hanging out with you guys. I had to bring the shill's attitude to the live stream for one, but this is right. Yes, yes. Comments would be so much more boring if you didn't have like snide, somewhat dirty, sarcastic comments in chat. Pound for pound, the best killing machines going. Yes. My folks have farm cats, and they scare away foxes and deer. And then they occasionally scare the cows and the goats and the sheep. Yeah. Okay. Oh, hey, Commander, if you're going to hop in a few minutes, I'll keep this going for a couple minutes. I might have to re-up the link. Yeah, let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to re-up the link. Because I have just the standard, I'm just using the standard meets right now. So what ends up happening is I don't have, I don't get any more than an hour. So there we go, fresh new link. I think I got that set up right. More options. Change layout. Yes, you are hearing me talk to myself in the background while I'm doing this. I do this all the time. All good. All good. And make sure your computer's set up. That works for me. Now, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step away for a second because I left my vape in the other room and I can't smoke in the house. So I will be back in like 30 seconds. Oh no, there was dead air. Dead air. If Dick's watching this, he's probably pulling his hair out for the dead air. But that's okay. I mean, I could be doing this entire live stream in portrait mode. So what'd I miss? I have a blend as far as the flavor of my vape. What I have is I have a clove mint blend. I like DeJarm cigarettes a lot. I particularly enjoy them. What I noticed here over the past couple of years is nobody really does clove vape juice that uses like actual clove. It's generally some sort of synthetic flavor, taste off. You know how if you smoke a DeJarm, your lips kind of get a little numb, your tongue kind of gets a little numb. Well, you don't get that with any of the various clove vapes. So what I did is I have clove oil, and I'm thinking of it. I need to put more in here. I have clove oil, and I get like a nice, halfway decent mint flavor e-juice, and I put some clove oil in that e-juice and then let it steep. So normally when you're with some of the places where you get the stuff really fresh, and they generally say to let it steep for like a week or so, I put the clove oil in as soon as I get it. I let it set for that week, and then I vape. So you'll probably hear me filling up my vape right now. Problem is I need to replace this thing at some point because the control board is starting to go bad. So my vape actually does not charge. And who do we got? Hey, Commander, how's it going? You are muted.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. It's going pretty good.
All right. You can see the penguins in the background.
Damn penguins.
You know, being
They keep stealing Mallory's cupcakes.
yeah, they tend to want to eat stuff. I like your setup too. You ever think of having the cat just like having a loop of the cat moving? I know that notice the robots are moving.
Trying to get my cat just kind of sort of chilling out and hanging out and not running all over the place is kind of hard because he's still a kitten. I might do a creepy thing with moving eyes at some point and maybe have the whiskers flick a little bit.
That's probably doable. And then when they get older, you can just take a video of them, you know, their bellies expanding and contracting while they're asleep.
let me fix this crop I have for meats so that we can get you in on the screen better.
For some reason, the penguins are green screening when the penguins are black. For just some strange reason.
Let's crop that in a little bit.
I'm just like testing out different models. It's probably going to take some time before I can get all these models these anime models are generated using Vroid. So they're pretty quick to make, but when I make the faces for the shills models that I'm working on, I'm going to have to make each shape key for the faces, and name them by hand. So that's going to take some time, but I'm going to be trying to work on it. Your model's probably going to be one of the hardest to make shape keys for.
Yeah, it's a pain. I still keep trying to get in touch with the guy that did the ship, and he stopped responding to comments on his videos like forever ago, which is a little frustrating because it would make it so much easier if I could get a hold of the original model. It's like, I mean, I would even, what little money I have, I would even do a donation for the render.
That's some, you said in the last stream there was like 700 something thousand faces. That model that I did, the shill ship, I think with all the textures and everything, the file was only about maybe under 300 megabytes. And the fire on the, coming out of the rockets, that is, I'm having to render, you have to render the transparency, the glow, and there's at least 10 frames. Yeah, baking textures takes a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a couple folks that work in the video game industry. And yeah, I've heard nightmares about trying to get renders to come out just right and things like that.
Like the renders that I gave the shills, like this one in the background, this one is on this computer. This is one of the originals. I actually had to brighten it to get it looking similar to the original because you went through compression and it kind of darkened it. So the new ones I'm rendering in PNG format. If I did ERX, it would just be overkill, and I don't think, I'm just trying to get an AVI to go from, I don't have my Adobe subscription anymore, so taking the PNGs directly and doing a comp, so that I can get the transparency is not an option, and doing a JPEG AVI, I just want to make sure that I don't lose so much that it just darkens everything, because when I tried to use transparencies, they didn't look right because of how degraded the background was. And it didn't look bad, but it was degraded relative to a first run PNG. I'm sorry, I'm making everyone sleep.
No, I'm actually think it's pretty cool because it's well beyond me, and I might actually learn something that might help me out with kind of the setup that I'm working with now. Unfortunately,
and I'm also
with my Thark's not fully articulated. So the arms are stuck and things like that, and so it's kind of hard to get actual poses. So the recommendation that I was told was to do a 360 scan, basically a crap ton of photos or just video, and just pop out each individual frame and then drop it into software that can do the mapping. Like, but my computer's 12 years old. It has a hard time just doing this live stream.
Yeah, but 12-year-old computers are still, the difference between a 12-year-old computer today and one that was 12 years old 10 years ago. I actually I have one Alienware up here, which I bought in 2017. I have a Republica Gamer laptop that I do most of the renders on. This Alienware has 32 gigabytes of RAM. It doesn't have an RTX card, unfortunately, but I do have the docking port where if I can find a PCI Express 4 RTX card and actually be able to afford it right now, then I can have RTX on this. I have a Republica Gamer. It has 16 gigabytes and it renders just a little bit faster than this one because it was 2020. And then I have one that is from 2014 that still can render about half as fast as this one. And
Yeah, I mean, I'm still running a 760 with only 2 gig. So there are times where I pull up Stellarium and this and try to do cross feed for like simulations for stuff like that, and the computer just bogs down. I mean, I'm still only running like 4 gigs of RAM at this point. On the board side, then 2 gigs for 2 gigs for the graphics card. And I mean, the 760 back in the day, when you got the OEM ones where you could actually play with the firmware a little bit, they actually weren't bad cards. But there's just a lot of stuff now that, God, I was offered a free game on Steam that looked beautiful. And then I looked at the minimum specs and it's like my hardware doesn't even meet the minimum requirements. It's like, yeah, I'm not gonna cook my card trying to do that.
Well, for me right now, I'm just recovering from not working since pretty much the onset of the pandemic. But I probably will be able to afford a brand new Alienware in like a few months.
Yeah, I get the whole non-working thing. My wife's a disabled vet and needs a lot of help. So we're stuck on dealing with the VA and trying to get that settled and trying to fight for every nickel and dime from the VA. And because my wife needs assistance, I'm functioning as her caregiver. But because they haven't declared her, she's like 90, 100%, but not declared unable to work. But she can't work. And
the red tape is sucking.
Yeah, it's one of those, if she was declared unable to work, unemployable, I would then be able to apply for caregiver benefits, and that's like a $36,000 a year bump in our income.
I know. I was looking for a caretaker for my mom, and it's about $80 a day.
Yeah, I mean, compared to what it would cost to get a caregiver in here, we would actually end up losing money. And yeah, caregivers are expensive as hell.
It kind of makes me wish that people didn't have their heads so far up their ass that they can't see that there's genuine need for these things for people. Not everyone's trying to bleed the system dry.
Yeah, and and then there's people not doing their jobs, especially when you're dealing with like the VA and stuff like that. people didn't file paperwork correctly. So while my wife is still covered, my daughter and I lost health insurance and won't get our health insurance back until November because of the way the system's set up.
Sucks.
It's like,
I
you know
wonder
what?
if they did that purposefully.
That in dealing with the VA, there's a lot of situations where people just don't do their job. There's a lot of screw ups. There's the red tape to deal with, things like that. So if it's not one thing, it's another. And if you talk to anybody that's had to deal with the VA, they'll tell you it's always a fight. It's always a fight. Yeah, real Cygnus. Yeah, legit safety nets, especially for vets. Yeah, it's especially my wife was just short of her 12 when what is essentially in the civilian world medical malpractice forced her to retire. So there wasn't anything we could do there because it was a military doctor that screwed up. And then the whole getting that shit dealt with and things like that. And it's just one of those, watching life savings go away, watching having to cash out bonds and crap like that. And every vet that I've talked to, and I mean, my old man was a regional rep. And it's stupid how they deal with the vets. It really is. It really is. They shouldn't have to fight for every nickel and dime. No anamorphic. I am on Jim's Discord. I just don't really participate that often because 9 times out of 10, when they're doing the whole live chat thing, it gets into subjects that I don't really feel like getting into. So I'm over on, and I'll poke the bear over on the Oakley server because it's fun. Then I'm on another server, having some actual, like, honest to God discussions with flat earthers, like experiments and things like that. We actually have direct contacts with supervisors, and it's one of those, the supervisor can only push things so far. It still has to do with scheduling and all. So we have contacts with regionals and supers and stuff with DAV, and I think my wife has a direct line to a VA supervisor at the Pentagon or up in Arlington. It's crazy. It's one of those, if I'm going to send you paperwork, if they give you any crap, you call me and then hand them the phone kind of thing. So
I hope it gets worked out for you. People shouldn't have to deal with this.
Yeah, it's not like my wife was a shitbagger in the Navy. The duty stations and all that she had, there are people that fight for those duty stations and put them on their wish list and never see it. She was in a situation where she turned down being transferred to White House comms. And that's a rather prestigious posting. So, but she has her name on a ship. She has her name on a first in class. She helped build the damn thing. So that's kind of cool.
Was that part of the, I know that the Navy and the shipyards cooperate with each other as far as designs go. Was that like at the Innovation Center over at Ingalls, or was that someplace else?
When she was assigned to the ship as a part of the build crew, it was still at port at Huntington Ingalls. It was still in the shipyard. So she worked real closely with the guys at Huntington Ingalls. And then after she was retired, she ended up getting a job at Huntington Ingalls for a short while until her health declined. So it was kind of. Go ahead.
What were you gonna say? What were you gonna say?
So it was kind of cool to have her come home from the day at Huntington Ingalls, and she was sitting in the office with some of the people that she worked with when they were building the ship and during sea trials. I thought that was so cool.
You know, it was funny. The deck of the New Mexico. They had these little screws that had tolerances of, say, plus or minus 0.2 or 1/1000 of 1 inch, and they were all different lengths. And for some strange reason, when they went to the deck of the New Mexico, they just decided to put them into any old hole and make them fit. And then when the New Mexico went out for sea trials, they tried to load torpedoes and they bent the deck of the New Mexico. And then the next quarter, after that giant fuck up, all the executives got a raise.
Oh, that's not surprising. That's not surprising. It's kind of with.
And from what I understand, no one got fired either.
It's kind of like with the ship that she worked on, the ship that she helped build and get sea ready and everything, was the Ford, was the new first-in-class aircraft carrier. And what's funny was some of the stuff that they were planning to implement was still in the design phase when the contract was signed. It wasn't any like actual hardware. Well, they were working test hardware for the catapult, but nothing that had ever been done on a ship or anything like that. And then they implemented some new radio and radar equipment that didn't quite work right. So to the lowest bidder. Yes, Aaron, definitely. But I don't know, the guys at Huntington Ingalls busted their ass trying to get shit to work.
I don't want to say too much about that place.
Well, while she was there, she enjoyed her time there. Her job was essentially helping them get things a bit more organized. So, trying to get the, I think, what was it? Dealing with work orders and assigning engineers and various other different things. I'm pretty much almost building a database from scratch was kind of what she was doing while she was there.
I think before I start saying things that'll get me in trouble, I think we should, wind up doing a different subject. Well, let's just say I had some clearances there.
To put it in perspective, I'm on a no-fly list to a number of countries because of the
I'm
work
not on
my wife
anyone's
did.
list yet. I'm not anyone's list that I know of anyway. But I've not done anything to get on any list. There are countries that I wouldn't go to. I wouldn't go to Russia. When I worked in Florida, my employer, since I worked as a tool and die maker, told me, we'll fire you if you go to China, because at that time in the early 2000s, let's just say you could find yourself being asked about your company's, processes in exchange for getting out. That's what I was told anyway when they told us not to go on vacation to China. Are you there?
Well, seeing that you probably know some of the acronyms, I will just say this. One of my wife's duty stations was NC3, Navy.
I have no clue as to C3.
Okay, for those of you watching and you as well, Commander, NC3 is Nuclear Strategic Command, Communications, and Control. They are the guys responsible for making sure that the Joint Chiefs and the Pentagon and the President can contact the nuclear arsenal. That was their job. That's what she did.
Yeah. I'd say you don't want your wife going to certain countries for her own safety.
Well, yeah, that too. That too. But that's her rotation there is the reason why even I'm not allowed to go to certain countries now. And some of the countries I'd actually like to visit. Well, maybe if the attitude changes and things change in a couple places.
I'd like to see Europe. I've always wanted to go to Australia, to the lava fields in Queensland to dig for sapphires. And
that would be cool. I could get into that.
I bought a faceting machine and taught myself how to cut gemstones by starting with the material, that synthetic material they tell you never to start with, which is sapphire, aluminum oxide, corundum. And then I moved on to the real thing. And then I found out that in terms of making money, you probably money versus time, you have to spend money to make money. And my money kind of started drying up after I learned that. So probably if I ever start cutting the gemstones again, I'll go to tanzanite, which was let's just say for the time invested, you'll spend like 18 hours to cut say a 4-carat sapphire versus about 4 hours to cut a 3 or 4-carat tanzanite. And it's just easier to sell the tanzanite because it's cheaper. But I don't live in an area where there's that kind of market for it. I have to move like to New York or Connecticut or New Jersey so that I could gain some kind of access to something connected to that big New York, let me crap away all of my money kind of I'm so rich market.
What are those places where you need to make 6 figures just to get a 1-room apartment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
South Florida was like that by the time that I left. But if I was able to move back there, like I want to move to the insanity pit known as Florida, thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah.
I know a few places where I could unload some of the stuff that I do have easy. There's one place at Pembroke Lakes Mall, if it still exists, the Manhattan Jewelry Exchange, where people will buy just loose stones off you. You'll never make money cutting diamonds because you'll pay like $2,000 for a piece of rough that will cut a 1-carat diamond. And then they will only pay you $100 a point, which means you lost half your money, not to count your time. So I hope I wasn't annoying with that.
Oh no. Karen Reese in the chat says, nukes are a lie. ICBMs will hit the firmament. Yes, they'll hit the firmament and make pretty fireworks.
You know, the firmament is just like, it just literally the word in Hebrew, I don't remember it offhand, but it just means an expanse. It doesn't mean anything solid. And it's just like a figurative word.
Yeah, I was.
And anyone who
I was thinking about it, and as far as the firmament goes, if they want to, flat earthers and all, if they all want to make it a dome, as far as a material goes, and you were talking about
There's no
sapphire,
material.
you were talking about sapphires. If it was thick enough, crystal sapphire, like watch crystals, like the domes, and the pressure was equal on all sides, that might work, but still it'd have to be forever thick.
Yeah, so, I don't think I have some engineering credits, some limited, but I never really got my AS. So I don't think right now, given that I've been away from that school since 2020, that I'm even qualified to do that math anymore. And I'll be quite honest if I don't know how to do something.
Yeah, I'll muddle through things from time to time. And it's fun. It's fun playing around with some stuff, but
I got as high as DE before the COVID killed that. Calc 3 was the last one I passed successfully.
what's funny is you're talking to somebody that's technically a high school dropout. Granted, I quit high school because of the administration, and I quit high school with a 3.5 GPA, but yeah, unfortunately never did make it to college. But then again, I'm also kind of one of those folks that did a lot of self-learning, a ton of
Well,
self-learning.
I spent my 20s reading books rather than going to bars. So I wound up not really having to work for any of my grades at all until I hit the probably 48 credits. I could just crap off and just go off what I had learned on my own in my 20s, when I started
Yeah.
the college in my early 30s.
Well, part of the problem for me is I'm also kind of more of a jack of all trades kind of person. Any field that I've ever worked in, I'll work in till I'm, passable and all, and then I'll move on. I'll go into another field. I've done everything from auto mechanics to, grinding glass for optics, to, computer repair, firmware level programming. And as far as computer repair, I'm talking going all the way back to you replace components on the motherboard kind of thing. And that, warranty repair for all the major electronics manufacturers, stuff like that. Gas station cashier. It was like, what's this like? Well, let's do this. Okay. Well, I'm good. Okay, moving along. So
It's okay. You don't have to have I'm going to say this, you don't have to have an official accreditation to be competent in something. It just lets everyone know that you've been cleared. Now, there are certain things that, let's say it was 2 years ago. I would be confident that if you asked me to design a simple truss or a house frame, I knew the math to do that. I passed dynamics and statics in the engineering program. But could I do that today? No, and I don't have the degree. I'd have to go back and actually retake those classes.
yeah, and
I'm
same thing
competent
here. I did carpentry and cabinet making. I worked with my dad doing carpentry and cabinet making. Now, yeah, a little bit of plumbing here and there, stuff like that. Like more like handyman kind of stuff. But could I build a cabinet today? Oh, hell no. I'd probably screw it up. I'd probably measure once and cut 4 or 5 times. But, that whole getting back into the groove thing, If I did it for a while and got back into the groove, yeah, it'd probably be passable. It wouldn't be the greatest work in the world, but yeah. Now the funny thing is being the jack of all trades, there are fields that I pull from and carry over into what would seem like totally unrelated fields.
Like me with machining and then going to the cutting of the gemstones. It's not technically related, but it's not technically the same thing, but there are some skills that you learn. I remember when I first was put on a ODID grinder. I had never operated it before, but I had basically done tool and die work in Florida for about 3 years plus 2 years of a trade school. And I wound up basically playing the KO Lee ODID grinder like a musical instrument, just listening to the sounds that it was making and transferring the flat grinding sounds, what I should hear, over to the ODID grinding sounds. And the people that I was doing, they said, "You told us you never did this." And I remember one day the inspection people took me into the inspection room to congratulate me because there was an internal diameter where they could not measure the difference between one end of the internal diameter and the other. This was for a punch for a technical impact at another company here where I live. But you can take those skills and move them over. And I'd have to say that woodworking people can get far more creative than a lot of machinists because I'm used to being able to basically control everything to the nearest 10th of 1,000th of 1 inch in some cases, and working in thousandths of an inch because that's the equipment we have. But I get nervous when I'm not using such equipment, but people who are used to wide ass tolerances, sometimes can be more creative than I am, where I want everything exact.
Yeah. Yeah, I've run into that myself. Like with collimating my telescope, collimating optics. I'll get to that. Yeah, this looks dead on. Everything says this is dead on. So we're good to go. And then like a week later, but what happens if I was off by, a couple of microns? That's a big tolerance error for optics. So then go back in and go and recollimate and stuff like that. It's like, oh, so I did have it right the first time. Meanwhile, the wife's looking at me. Why do you have optics all over the counter again? Shh, it's a secret. I was working. Yeah.
Snell's law.
It's funny. I had, back in the day when I was still doing regular photography, I got the original Bessa R rangefinder, that re-released Bessa R that came out. And I had some Russian Leica screw mount lenses, and one of the ones that I had was the 28 super wide, was the 28 wide angle, but the way it was designed, the rear element set real far back. I mean, it was almost like, just a couple millimeters above the film plane. It was like, would barely clear a shutter. Well, the Bessa R had the metering cell and everything, and the metering cell gets in the way. So I literally ground down the outlying edges of the optics where it wouldn't affect the frame, where it wouldn't affect the image. I literally ground that down with a Dremel. I did optics work with a Dremel.
I would have never have done that.
When I started working with telescopes, I was talking to a guy that showed me how to grind mirrors. I told him that story and just got this look of horror. You did what? On what? With what? Oh, it's like, hey, here's the tools I had. So I made it work.
And that's something that I would have never done. I used to have a machine shop in my garage. I would have probably made a complete production out of it. I would have probably indicated the lens in to maybe plus or minus half a tenth. I still have some of the indicators that from when I did machining work. I would have just indicated it in and then made a whole production out of it. I had a tool post grinder. That was a precision grinding wheel that, the bearings were precision and attached to the tool post, and I would have ground it that way. You did it on the cheap.
Yeah, I never had a machine shop. I mean, there are times where even now I need to make shims, real thin shims, and I will sit there with a glass flat, wet sandpaper, and put the wet sandpaper on top of the glass flat so it gives me a nice flat surface, and sit there and for hours grind down by hand to get the thickness that I want, and just sit there. It's like every couple of minutes, grab the vernier calipers, check it. Nope, it's not quite right. I'm off by like 20 microns. Damn it, I still need to, and just keep grinding and grinding and grinding by hand.
They sell shim stock. I think MSC. We used to use Starrett shim stock in the tool and die department at the Edwin B. Stimson Company in Florida. Depending upon if we needed to shim a cutting section, we would use, and the amount we needed to shim it up was, if there was enough time and we just cut the plate down and then grind something using the surface grinder. But if we didn't have time or just be too much of a pain in the ass for what we did, we'd use the shim stock, and you can cut that with scissors.
Yeah.
Starrett makes great shim stock.
Being a broke gadgeteer, it's kind of one of those, okay, so I could buy shims or I could sit here with sandpaper. Because I'm also kind of one of those people that will save a penny if I can. Yeah, there have been times where I've gotten looks because I've done it by hand and taken forever, instead of just going, you know what, I'm going to spend the $1.30 and just have somebody send it to me. But I kind of enjoy it. I mean, I did this one thing where on a lark, I had a somewhat thick metal plate, and I ground a telescope mirror out of a metal plate. Some of the very first reflectors were metal plate. They used metal plates. I was like, so how hard is this? Well, let's try it.
I respect you for that. I probably wouldn't even try that.
I mean, it was a crap grind. It wasn't a great grind. I mean, I was off by quite a bit, but I was doing it all by hand. I didn't even have a proper lap for it. I was actually using, I impregnated a hard ball with a grinding material and did it that way. And I know the ball wasn't perfect.
If you want something that can polish up real good, go to a lapidary supplier and get some diamond lap spray, and you can impregnate just about anything with the diamond grit. And if you want a really great finish, start out with the rough, of course, but then just get diamond powder, and it's relatively cheap. And I remember I needed a finish for a punch. One place I worked, making making dies for a technical impact. I don't want to give out too much. I already gave out probably too much of where I had worked in the past. But I just took some of my lapidary abrasives because I needed basically to where you couldn't see. The finish they wanted was I think it was something like a 16 or an 8. Basically almost, if not a mirror finish. And I have been away from the machining for years now. But the lapidary abrasives worked far better than the ones my employer provided for me.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
a clue.
I mean, I polished when I was doing Watchworks. I polished watch crystals with the same compound that you would normally use for like glass for polishing optics. And no machine, do it all by hand, take forever. But it was still
They
fun.
didn't even give you like a lapidary wheel, like a flat lap wheel?
I was just ordering the grinding material. And hold on, I'm trying to look something up real quick. It was a lot of fun though. I actually enjoyed doing it by hand. I really did enjoy doing it by hand. Okay, so alert box. Why isn't my alert box not working? Stupid. Stupid Streamlabs. Stupid Streamlabs. Well, I'm going to do a shout out to High Inquisitor for tipping me $5 US. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. But yeah, I just I made my own
Do-it-yourselfers talking shop.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, I enjoy doing stuff like that. I really do. And why didn't that
I
pop up?
I used to machine stuff just to see how perfect I could make things. I had one block that I knew was square, flat, and perpendicular. I mean, square, flat, and parallel to 2/10 of 1,000th of 1 inch over 1 foot. And I would just try to replicate it with blocks of steel. That, that perfect square.
Yeah, that sometimes making your own tools is worth it, and then yeah, other times just like, you know what? I need to go out and buy the actual tools. I need to get the right stuff.
Well, some tools you need before you can make other tools. Like you need a set of standards before you even can tell how good what you've made is. Just because it looks flat doesn't mean it's flat. But, well, yeah, that would be a good thing. Just because it looks flat doesn't mean it's flat. Though a granite surface plate, even though we know the Earth is an ovalate spheroid, inspection grade granite surface plate grade A has less curvature to it than the surface of the Earth, and the Earth is so damn big and has such little curvature in terms of, if you take what was the flat earthers used, which is an approximation over short distances, 8 inches per mile squared. I don't have a calculator, but 8 inches divided by how many inches in divided by 5,280 divided by 12, we're getting into less than a thousandth of an inch, I think. And per inch, that you really can't perceive that with your eye.
Yeah.
But if you get a dial indicator and a surface plate, you can measure curvature that you can't even see. You can have parallels that you think are ground perfectly, and the whole middle can be concave or convex, or one side can be higher than the other. That's why you need measuring instruments to make sure that, measuring instruments to supplement your what you perceive. And I think that's for any people like PCNet in the chat. I think he might be there. I can't really see because I'm not that adept at, looking at the chat and keeping everything. But you really need your measuring instruments.
Yeah, sometimes fudging it just doesn't cut it.
Not when you're getting paid. Now, I'm not going to do machining anymore. But if I had my own machine shop in my own garage, I would. But it's nerve-wracking because at the level that I was, by the time I quit it and found something else, I was getting paid close to $60,000 a year. And at that level, if you screw up, you just screwed up something that's at least $10,000. Or in the case of some of the work I did for another shipyard, if I screwed up, it would be a minimum of a $30,000 fix. And the shafts that I was working on were worth at least $250,000 a piece. And that's nerve-wracking. And then at the model shop over where I was able to take a picture of that model that Dick showed of the flying pancake. It was a NASA model. You think that metal is super strong and super resilient when you need to have certain geometric tolerance. If you drop something, you have just screwed it up and you have put so much time into it. It's nerve-wracking. I can't take that stress anymore.
Oh no, I get it. And in doing some of the watch work stuff, not paying attention, and let's say I go to grab a watch hand to put it on the mounting tool so that I can mount it to the stem. Just not paying attention, reach over, pick it up with my fingers and bend it, or crack the loom.
Or you crack the ruby bearings, the alumina bearings, and I can't tell you how many dial indicators that were, when sometimes they lose their there's a spring in there, sometimes they lose their preload. I do know how to put the preload back, but you need to take the dial off. You need to take the little pointer off and you need to take it apart. And I can't tell you how many times I wound up having to get a whole new indicator because I wound up cracking some of the ruby bearings.
Ooh.
Or just destroying the and we're talking $200, $300 indicators.
Yeah, that's rough.
And all my indicators except for one good one was an Interrapid that never had that preload problem, but it cost me $500. All of them have bent needles because they lose their preload.
Professor Phil Bell asked in the chat, did anyone reveal who turns the moonlight off and on during lunar phases? I'm working on that. Right now, one of the reasons why I haven't been putting out a lot of content is I'm trying to get celestial navigation working without using globe maths. It's a pain in the ass. I'm
That's
having to
probably
invent,
because you need a globe.
yeah, I'm having to invent calculations that are kind of sorta in the neighborhood, but not exact. And just hope it works. Just because I'm curious to see what it would take to get it even close to working on flat Earth. So, turning the moonlight on and off during lunar phases, that will probably end up being a project at some point.
These guys behind me are responsible for doing that. Makes sense as any other flat Earth theory.
Well, part of the reason why when they come up with their random excuses for this, that, or the other thing, part of the reason why I try to work it out is simply because I can use that as a weapon against them in their own arguments. Well, you say it works like this. Well, actually, it would never work like this. It would work closer to this. But I'm not going to tell you how But I'm not going to tell you how I got the secret sauce, how I came up with this. I'm just going to show you that no, it would work like this. It's part of the reason why
I'm trying to remember his name.
It's part of the reason.
Greek guy who invented epicycles, and it took something like 16 or 17 volumes. I'm forgetting his name, but he predicted the movements of the planets. He produced a system that worked. It just was bollocks. I'm trying to remember his name. Some Greek guy invented epicycles. I can't remember his name.
I can't remember off the top of my head. I think one of the model arguments that I use against flat earthers, whether they realize it or not, is I use the Tychonic model, the geo-helio hybrid model, where the Earth is in the center of the universe and the planets the sun rotates around Earth, but the planets rotate around the sun. And the only reason why I use that model is, okay, so you end up having, instead of a dome, you have a sphere, a celestial sphere full of stars. And, well, planets are orbiting, everything looks right.
But what about the parallax that we can measure with Alpha Centauri? No, there's this Doppler shift with the if the Earth was at the center, why would there be a Doppler shift in the infrared background radiation that would be telling us that we orbit something and that there's a general direction that we're traveling?
Well, see, that's part of the reason why I use Tycho's model, is because to the average layman, they're not going to be doing parallax. They're not going to be doing redshift measurements or anything like that. You generally have to start getting into higher end telescopes and precision tools and precision measurements. And it was parallax and redshift that ended up invalidating Tycho's model.
Still, Tycho Brahe, for his time, wasn't a dummy.
No, he wasn't, and it's a brilliant model. It's so strange how well it works until you start looking into redshift and parallax measurements and things like that. And if you make up a couple excuses, you can kind of sort of blow that off too. That's why the geo-helio hybrid guys, the folks that believe that, I don't really mess with them. I don't go after them. There's not a ton of them. They're not extremely loud. And then if you actually do start getting into a discussion with them, you're starting, you start having arguments about proper motion of stellar objects and all this other stuff. And it gets really, really deep into the science and the maths and things like that. The flat Earth, it's kind of, no, you guys aren't even close. And that's another reason why I haven't put out a lot of content lately, because my bot scrubs over 100 channels from like flat Earth, and I'm really bored. I'm really bored with them. There's nothing new. There's nothing interesting. Yeah, there's not any new content coming out that's like one of those. How high were you when you came up with this idea? You know, how many times have you been dropped on your head to think this? There's just really not been anything new.
It's just, I think they're running out of steam, and hopefully soon, I hope soon, people just drop the conspiracies and the bullshit. They say most of these people like Bible fundamentalists, right? Isaiah 8:12, I think, tells you, do not call conspiracy what this people calls conspiracy, and do not dread what they dread. So cut the New World Order, flat earth, pseudoscience nonsense. Pull your heads out of your asses, because the Bible tells you no conspiracy theories.
And then that gets into a whole nother discussion. That ends up getting into religion with them. And honestly,
well, it's like beating a dead horse, because I've been there. You can read them their own books. They will disregard it. It's just like, well, you've seen it.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, it's actually, I think it's gone beyond beating a dead horse. It's like beating a horse until it's dead, then beating the dead horse, then ripping the leg off the dead horse and beating it with its own leg.
It doesn't get through.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, granted, I think one of their issues is the inability to grasp or visualize three-dimensional space.
At scale, it's actually quite a difficult thing for someone to truly have a grasp of how big the Earth is in comparison to a human being.
Yeah, scale is hard. Scale is definitely hard. I didn't fully grasp the scale of the universe until I saw the what was it? The deep sky photo from the Hubble, where it's like, yes, everything you see here, except for this point, this thing here, and this thing here, everything you see here is galaxies. And I was like, wow.
And then
now it makes sense.
Was it? I haven't seen the number in a while. It's like 14 billion light years or 13 billion light years. And then you consider that it's actually bigger than that because of the inflation that we can't see. Because, we can only see, like the distance between some of those galaxies that you see in the Hubble Deep Field are actually now moving away from us faster than the speed of light, but light that they did emit all those years ago is finally reaching us. So the universe is bigger than we can even see as far back as the Hubble Deep Field. It's almost infinite. I think it was the Space-Time channel, run by PBS or the BBC, that there was a article that it hasn't been confirmed yet, but some people say their computer model says that the universe is slightly curved, and if their measurements are correct or the program that they're running is correct, it will curve back in on itself, but no human would actually ever be able to go the full circle, because there's still the expansion of space-time that would make it impossible for anyone to make the journey, because space is traveling, you know, moving apart. The galaxies would be moving apart faster than the speed of light, relative to each other, the inflation of, or the expansion of space-time itself. The only thing that can move faster than light is space-time itself, space itself.
And then that gets
And it
into
just,
a whole different thing with the calculations and how they come about that and such. And
I probably couldn't do them right now. Maybe a few years ago when I had just gotten done with Calc 3, and you move into DE, where you really start understanding exactly how the calculus works and how to use Euler's method, I think it was, to get a very, very close approximation of problems that will never be solved any other way. And there's probably so much I've forgotten. My Calc 3 professor said, "Don't worry. If you wind up failing this class, you've already been exposed to more mathematics than probably 99% of the world's population. Not the first world population or the college-educated population, but the world population as a whole." And I did pass that class with a high B. It
that's
was
awesome.
COVID and the COVID, and I had probably the worst communicator as far as a professor. That really killed the DE. He would spend 30 minutes writing on the board, and then he would say, "Oops, I made a mistake," and then wind up solving the problem. But he expected us to move at his pace. He was a professor who had been so for over 20 years. He wasn't explaining. I've had good professors who explained, and if you needed help, they would offer the help. But when you get that far into the mathematics, the computer programs that can give you practice, there's only so many programs so many problems that can give you a definite answer, and you wind up basically having one or two practice problems. And those are the ones that they give you because they're easy enough for you at that time to solve, that you can feed the computer a definite answer versus an approximation or giving it we were doing vector fields at the last math class that I had, and it was something else. So, and again, I'd have to take probably Calc 3 again before I could even attempt DE. And I might have to, well, when I took Calc 3, I was actually revealing Calc 2 because I took the summer off and almost forgot most of Calc 2, but I wound up catching up. But there's just so much you don't know exists. When I did the pre-calc, which was the trigonometry, and I asked one of my professors, "Can you show me how to calculate the linear distance? That is the distance along a screw with a specified diameter and pitch." He said, "I could teach you how to do that, but then I'd be building a foundation that wasn't very stable, and that's the only thing you could do, and it would collapse immediately." He told me I would have to wait till vector calculus. And that was 3 years. I
and
mean, not 3 years, 3 semesters.
and that's one of the things that that kind of held me up in some aspect, and still holds me up today with mathematics and engineering and things like that in general, is I have to get a feel for it. You could explain even basic algebra to me until you're blue in the face. I won't get it until I get a feel for what it's actually doing, what its functions are. And
Same here. You need a good teacher. Like there's a there's a Calc 3, no, it wasn't Calc 3, it was the DE. The first assignment was to find an equation and then to explain everything behind it. And I wound up going for the dynamic tension on a spring. And I had to ask, you think it's that simple, but when you're calculating it out and when you're trying to figure out, I don't know, but I beat my head against the wall and I had to ask people for help explaining what the mathematics did behind it, because from every class from Calc 1 until Calc 3, I memorized the algorithms without really understanding what the algorithms were doing, and I passed flawlessly. Well, not flawlessly. Calc 3 was the one that I got the high B, but I didn't understand what was going on. I just was great at memorizing the algorithms. And I think that you want to understand everything that's going on about the problem. I just memorize the algorithms. And when I try to wrap my head around some of the issues in DE, it was probably the first time I was actually challenged, because then we're getting into, things that are beyond algorithms. You actually have to have a more in-depth understanding. And whilst I do have understanding of things mechanical, it's just a whole nother world, and I can't explain it, especially right now when I'm tired.
No, I get it. I get it. Because like with me in mathematics, it's kind of one of those, I will do well in a particular branch once I get a feel for it. And by a feel, it's one of those, somebody hands you an equation, you look at it, you don't go through it, you just look at it and you're like, something's wrong here. Once I get to that point with any particular field or any particular branch of mathematics, it's much easier for me to go, okay, so just look at this and go, something's wrong here. And then go back and work through it and actually do the work to find out where the error is, what corrections need to be made, and things like that. My teachers in school hated that. They hated that because I got to the point with algebra where it was faster for me to do it, to revert it back to basic arithmetic, do it in basic arithmetic, prove it out, and then convert it back into algebra. My teachers, they threw fits over that.
They don't let you use scientific calculators in any of the calculus classes. Not scientific calculators, any calculator capable of calculus. They want you to be able to use calculators which can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and do square roots and exponents, and that's it. So basically, we were memorizing the algorithms, and it was the algebra that would actually wind up killing you if you memorize the algorithms. The algebra was what killed a lot of the people's grades in the calculus classes, not necessarily the process of the calculus itself.
Yeah, I did horrible in algebra. I failed algebra twice. And that was because the whole inherent understanding of what algebra is doing, what it's trying to accomplish, and going, yeah, this is just basic arithmetic. I'll just do it over here and it'll be much quicker, much easier. And then my teacher go, well, if you're not good at this, you're not going to be good at any of the higher maths. Once I got into the higher maths, I'm like, oh, okay, so this does this does this is easy to calculate. I can work with this and work it back and do all this other stuff. So some of my teachers were the same teachers I had when I failed algebra. They're like, how are you able to do this, but failed even basic algebra? Like, it's like, this is rather obvious. It doesn't need to be ripped apart, torn apart, reinvented. Real Cygnus said he had to take Algebra 2 twice. Yeah. Same thing. Same thing. So that's kind of like the same thing when I look at when they start spitting out calculations for the expansion of the universe and stuff like that. It's like, I'm not going to go through those calculations that you're putting up there right away, and work those out. But I'm looking at that and going, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, I can see why this theory was abandoned. And just by looking at the calculations without actually digging into them.
And one thing, though I forget exactly what the formula is, one thing when people think E equals mc squared, that's it in terms of relativity. There's actually something that they put underneath E equals mc squared, and I forget exactly what it is, but it winds up equaling, basically equals mc squared, under the radical, it's more complicated than that. E equals mc squared basically only works if the reference frame is completely stationary. From what I remember.
In the grand scheme of things, E equals mc squared is the Cliff Notes. There's so much more behind it.
I do have like a video that I never finished where the flat earthers say, how can an atmosphere, exist next to a a vacuum? And I actually used Blender, created a gravity field, though it's not really to scale, but using particles, showing how they bounce off the surface of the earth, because a air molecule is basically a ballistic object. It's flying at close to the speed of sound, it bounces into something, and unless it reaches escape velocity, it doesn't leave the earth.
Yeah.
It's just like if you have a basketball, right? And you burn the basketball and you turn it into gas. It's still held to the earth because when it was a basketball before you burned it, it was subject to gravity. And it's still subject to gravity even though it's a gas. So I do have an animation where just for like a minute, you see one particle bouncing off the sphere, flying up, staying up for a while, falling back down. And I probably should finish that one. But
yeah, and I mean, you get into the transference of energy between the particles when they come in contact with each other, in addition to gravity itself and stuff like that. And yeah, and they just don't get it. And I had a teacher that when he was trying to explain it, he made it real simple. He said, as far as gas particles in the atmosphere, Earth, gravity, stuff like that, he goes, it's like playing pool. Every individual ball is a gas molecule. It runs into another ball, it transfers energy. Sometimes it loses all of its energy, sometimes it doesn't. And that's kind of what's going on. And I really enjoyed that teacher because he taught things just so well. He was a great science communicator.
Reminds me of a segment in Donald Duck in Math Magic Land, where they're explaining the mathematics behind billiards. And it's really neat how they showed with simple fractions can help your billiards game greatly improve. Yeah. Everyone should go and Google that and watch it. Hope I
John
didn't
Rapp
bug anyone with that.
John Rapp put in chat. According to that flat Earth genius, space violates natural laws in violation of second law of thermodynamics. They love their catchphrases. Yeah, and what I'm thinking about teasing them with is thermodynamic disequilibrium. Experiments in thermodynamic disequilibrium using chemical reactions. There's a few experiments where you will get random patterns that will start to generate, and they repeat over and over and over again. And on the surface, without actually digging into what's going on, it looks like a second law violation.
Yeah, there's one chemical reaction that's like it just produces different color waves through material, and it looks like it keeps on going, but sooner or later it stops, but it goes for
Eventually
a
it
while.
dies down. Yeah, I remember watching a show on that. And they said initially when this Russian scientist came out with this, everybody was going, "It's impossible. That can't be done. You're lying. We're not going to publish your paper." And then he went and showed it to people, and they're like, "Hey, this is cool. Did we just break the law?" God, I
Not
forget.
really.
Yeah, and I forget how long it was before they figured out exactly how it worked. But it is a pretty cool experiment. I'd actually love to do it. Love to do it myself. Just do the experiment myself.
There's one fake perpetual motion machine that actually successfully uses Brownian motion to produce something that looks like perpetual motion. What you do is you have basically some kind of fan or something in a hot area, and you have a ratchet that only allows the shaft to move in one direction. And then you have a colder area so that with pretty much a similar object. I've watched something, was it the periodic, was it Space Time show, or was it that was their thing on perpetual motion machines, how they would violate the different laws. There's one, the only reason why it appears to work is because the air molecules are moving faster in the hot area than in the cold area. If the temperature differential goes away, then the machine stops. And that's the closest thing to what one would perceive might be a perpetual motion machine anyone's done so far. But it doesn't violate the laws of thermodynamics because one area is hot, one area is cold. The gas molecules in one area are moving faster than another area. I'm sorry, I just blurted that out because we were talking about
It's all good.
the, perceived violations of perpetual motion. And I tend to remember a lot of stuff. So it's a blessing and a curse. Because I also remember the bad stuff that drives me nuts. I can remember what dumbass politicians said 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and it's still as if I remember it's still almost like yesterday. I remember George W. Bush said his favorite Bible verse was, "I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my destiny." And all those preachers who pretty much fawned over him and worshipped him, they never cared enough about him to take him aside and say, "George, that's what King Uzziah said just before God gave him leprosy and made him live in a cave." And I remember a good portion of Obama's speech, A Call to Renewal. I remember a good portion of his inaugural address. And when I was in South Florida, I rattled off FDR's 1934 State of the Union address, the part about the WPA, in front of some people who were actually there in the halls in the Capitol when he delivered that speech. And they asked me, who was that? And I said it was FDR. If I had actually been able to afford to stay in Florida, some of you probably would have known my real name by now, because some people had taken a shine to me who were officers of the state Florida Democratic Party. But I got a memory that's like, it drives me nuts, the stupidity that I've observed and have to relive.
Oh, no, I get it. I get it. Well, hey, it's coming up on a little over 2 hours. I have a little one that I need to wake up for school in the morning. So I think I'm going to wrap up at this point. Thank you very much for coming on. Much appreciated.
Thanks. I hope I didn't embarrass myself.
No, you're awesome, dude. You're awesome.
Thanks.
I know I've been kind of skipping the live streams and stuff, and I know I skipped movie night live stream here last week. Like I said earlier in the stream, I am trying to get back into the groove and get more content out, and gonna try to gotta try to do movie night again this weekend. I promise it won't be a bad sci-fi movie this time.
Science Fiction Theater 3000. I love that show.
So do I. They come across some really good ones that are just hilarious. The first movie night I did was Plan 9 from Outer Space, because that's a classic. That's a wonderful movie, actually, because it's so bad it's good. And then the next one I did was just horrible. Flying space lobsters.
Dr. Zoidberg.
Oh, man. But yeah, I'm going to wrap it up. For those of you that watched the debunks I did earlier, I will trim those down and release those individually as debunks on their own. So if you want to go back through those, and if I remember, if I don't, somebody hit me up in comments. If I remember, I will be sure to post links to the master videos and files and stuff in the description. So if anyone wants to go through and critique it and actually take a look at it frame by frame, instead of me compressing, 2 hours down to a couple minutes, feel free, because I'm always up for feedback on my experiments. So on that note, we are out of here.
Bye.